So as you can see, I'm stood outside the Midland Hotel in Morecambe. Going to be testing the Formatt Hitech ND filters, the #1 kit from Joel Tjintjelaar, if that's how you pronounce his name, and see what results we get. I took some photos here 6 weeks ago, something like that, and I was just using my circular filters, one which is a Hoyer 10-stop ND filter, which I paid a reasonable amount of money for, 70, 80 quid, and a Gobe 6-stop, which I just bought off Amazon for about 30 quid. And as you can see in the images I took previously, there's a lot of vignetting because I'm stacking them up, no surprise there. Also quite a lot of color shift, especially around the edge of the photo. So I had to manipulate that quite a lot in post-processing to get something I could work with. So today I'm hoping I've got a bit more scope to get a wider angle, don't have to crop it as much, and that there's no color shift and no vignetting. So we'll go and see. I'll recreate one of the pictures I took so we can do a direct comparison. I also want to do a different composition, which I'm going to show you in a second. And the weather today, I'll turn my camera around. You'll see the sun is behind some sort of low cloud on the horizon. There is a little bit of blue sky just about to show itself, and I'm hoping the sky might get more interesting while we're here. So I'll go off. I'm going to grab my first photo before the sun moves around too much, because I want to do it from this end of the building looking right along, and so I don't want the sun shining straight into my lens. So I'll grab that first, then I'll recreate one of the others. This is where I've set my camera up. This is a one angle that I didn't get last time. That's why I've set it up here. When I did some research online, it's quite a nice photo taken from an architectural magazine that took this angle. Wasn't one I thought of doing, but it should be one that I can do things like eliminate some of the cars from quite easily, and just give me the third one to make a nice set for this project. The next thing I'm going to do is mount the kit on the camera. Right, so I've got, this is the 86 to 72mm step ring. So that's the first thing I'm going to put on my camera. And it's a little bit cold this morning. My hands are a bit cold. I'll get that screwed on. Then I'm going to put on this magnetic holder, which is the 86 to 86, and that just screws on to the step ring I've just put on. Okay, now we're ready to mount the holder. So first thing I'm going to do, back off this screw, and it just clips in like that, and then tighten up that screw. So that's now in place. Now a circular polarizer, and that just drops in. That's it. And that clicks into place. The next thing I'm going to do, compose my shot and meter it so that I can then make the calculation for what filter I need to use to get an exposure. I'm looking for an exposure of minimum of 4 minutes, but something ideally between 4 and 6. I've got my camera set up and composed, and is metering at a 60th, chosen f6.3. Really, the f-stop isn't critical for this kind of photography, just something where your lens performs well, so don't go to either the widest or the narrowest stop, choose something in the middle, f8, f7.1, f6.3, whatever, somewhere around there, and that should give you a good exposure. Now, the other thing I wanted you to see, a lot of people walking about, it's 10:30 in the morning or something, so there's a lot of people checking in and out of the hotel, and this is one of the beauties of the long exposure, is it'll help to eliminate them. So now that I know what the metering is, 60th f6.3, I can calculate what filter I need and how long the exposure is going to be. So I'm using an app on my phone. You can calculate this. If you don't know how to do it, I'll leave a link to a video up here where I put the formula in and show you how to calculate what it should be. Now, I set off with a 60th, and I was finding that my exposure time was either too short. If I went down to like 13 stops, it was 2 minutes. If I went up to 16 stops, then it's too long. So the next thing I did was change my ISO on my camera, and I've gone up to ISO 400. I think I still get some good resolution there. And that's come out with a 1/60th. So when I come out with that, 6 stops, minutes, 49 seconds, tiny bit longer than I need. But if we go down to 13, you can see that's only 51 seconds. We do need to allow a little bit longer, but 51 seconds is really too short. So I'm going to stick with 16. Now I need to convert that into seconds so I can set my bulb timer, and then we're good to go. So when I calculate that, it comes out at 409 seconds. I'm going to add a little bit more. They do recommend you could these long exposures adding like either 30 or 50% more. So I'll maybe go for 500 seconds and see how that looks. So the next thing I do is fit in my filters. So we're going to need a 10 and a 6. That's going in the first slot. So that's that one in there. Then we want the 10 stop, and also going to slot that one in. And finally, I'm going to put in the light leakage blockers. Don't know what the real word for these is, but we'll put them on. Now I'm going to check my setup is all okay. Set my camera to what I want. So I need to set this to bulb. So I've set a 5-second delay. Just need to get to bulb. Bulb timer. Where's the time? Bulb timer's on. So now it's just a waiting game. Exposure's turned out about somewhere around 8 minutes, I think. 500 seconds. So while I'm waiting for this exposure to run its course, let me just tell you a few settings you should have on your camera. Mount it on a sturdy tripod. There's no wind today, I'm nicely sheltered where I am here, so not too worried about stabilizing that anymore. But the other things you should do is use a remote or the self-timer on the camera. I set one actually for 10 seconds to make sure I didn't have any camera shake. Other thing you should do is turn off the steady shot, because a tripod can fool the camera into thinking it needs to stabilize itself even though it's on the tripod, and it introduces some shake accidentally by trying to compensate for something that isn't there. Other than that, you should be good to go. The other thing I've done is manually focus. What I did actually was I autofocus at first, so the camera had got itself nicely focused. Then I switched it over to manual so that it wouldn't change with all the filters and everything on it. So I did my focusing before adding all the filters, because it's difficult for the camera to autofocus when you've got particularly like 16 stops of ND filter there, because it's made the image very dark. If you've got all those right, then you should get a good exposure. Well, you can see that on the back of the screen, but the exposure's finished and I'm just checking it, and what I'm really interested in is the histogram. And what you really want to do is make sure you've got all your shadows and you haven't blown your highlights, of course. And I could have gone a little bit longer, pushed it further to the right, but I've pretty much captured everything, so I'm very happy with that. I'm going to move on and just take another shot from the other location. I've set up exactly the same shot as I took last time. Well, I think it's almost the same. It's good enough for me to do a comparison of the two filters anyway. So I'll do that back in the warmth when I get back to the office. One of the things I can see straight away is it has made this much more versatile for me, because I can use the full width of my lens. There's no vignetting, so I can go to full 16mm. I don't need to worry about setting it on 16 and then having to crop out a lot of the frame because I've got this big fringing effect around the outside of my shot. The other thing, it's a little bit hard for you perhaps to tell in the photos, but there's a lot less color shift. Particularly if you look at the outer edges, you'll see that the image is a lot cleaner. There's no shift of color. So from my point of view, these filters are really doing a great job. But I make my living from this, so it's worth me investing in this kind of quality. There are some cheaper kits out there. I think you'll have issues with possibly light leakage if you're using a holder and you don't add an extra hood over the top, or put your hat or coat or something over it to stop the light getting in. And I think you'll potentially have some issues with color shift as well. But do let me know which one you chose and how you got on with it, what kind of results you get. A lot of those issues you can deal with in post-processing. For me, it's important to have the best quality image I can to start with. One of the beauties of today and the lighting is that it's going to allow me to edit this in the way I want. And this is what I ended up with in the final shot. So I've kind of chosen the light direction because the sun hasn't been shining straight on it. It's nice, soft light, great for doing your own artistic interpretation. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it helps you choose the right filters for the kind of photography you're doing. And in the meantime, have some fun with your camera. Let me know how you got on, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.